it's Mika. I'm hoping to finish this series by next week, so expect very frequent uploads starting Monday. Anyways. Deku, I think you some prayer. By clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Chapter 83. Cornered. Katsuki raced above the trees after that stupid yellow coat. His wrists were starting to feel the strain, especially after the intensive training they'd been doing these past few days, but he ignored that and pushed forward.
Get back here, you ugly-ass motherfucker! Give her back!
Apologies, gentlemen, but finders keepers, the villain replied, making part of a tree disappear out of his path by shrinking it down into a little ball. Somehow, I don't think that applies to kidnappings, Todoroki said dryly.
Boys!
A high voice almost made Katsuki lose his rhythm, and he glanced down to see Pixie Bob running towards them.
You're not supposed to be engaging with the villains!
Katsuki bristled.
But that bastard...
He took Ragdoll, Todoroki cut in. He shrunk her down into one of the marbles in his pocket. The villain cheered. Good eye, but are you sure you saw what you saw? He did some weird sleight of hand thing, pulling marbles out of numerous hidden pockets and making them disappear again. She could be in this pocket, or this one, or this one, or perhaps in my shoe, or maybe even in my... He was cut off as the ground rose up beneath him and buried him up to his chin.
It doesn't matter much where you hid her, Pixie Bob huffed. We've got you, and that means we've got her too. Good work, cuties. Just as I expected from such strapping young kittens.
You did all the work, Todoroki grumbled. Katsuki rolled his eyes. And I still have a boyfriend. Pixie Bob pouted and made a few miniature dirt monsters.
Then I guess I better keep looking. Let's find the others.
Mandalay shrieked as she was pulled roughly into the undergrowth, and she would have attacked if she hadn't recognized the student that grabbed her. Shoji? What are you... Shh. Shoji clapped a hand over her mouth. He's tracking sound and movement.
What?
Mandalay whispered. Who? There was a loud crash a few feet away, and Mandalay gasped softly at the sheer size of the shadow currently hunting them. Dark shadow, Shoji muttered. It's difficult to control in the dark. Tiger ran into the forest, leaving the lizard-looking villain tied to a tree as he searched for more students. Ragdoll should be clearing the far end of the forest, so Tiger headed in that direction so he could meet up with her. He wasn't running long before he heard something moving, and he headed in that direction, eyes widening when he saw a tired-looking Awase pulling a bleeding Yaoyotaro through the trees. When he caught sight of him, Awase looked up gratefully. Tiger! Thank goodness! It's coming! What's coming? Tiger asked. What are you... He took a sharp breath when he saw a Nomu charging through the trees behind them. Its arms were like Swiss Army knives, and trees crashed to the ground left and right as the Nomu cut through them with a chainsaw on one side and a nasty-looking axe on the other. You monster. Tiger lowered himself into a fighting stance. Attacking children? Have you no shame? The Nomu didn't respond. Not that Tiger expected it to, but it gave an unholy screech as it charged at him. Get behind me, children! Tiger shouted. I'll restrain this fiend. He contorted his body to avoid the worst of the blades, but there were so many to dodge that he couldn't get a good grip on the thing. Yayozuru, be careful, Awase said. You already made all those gas masks. You're gonna pass out. I can... Yayozuru panted. I just need to make one more thing. Don't strain yourself, young Yayorozu, Tiger insisted. I've got this. At least, he hoped he did. Normus were notoriously hard to beat, and this one in particular was tricky. But as long as he could save the students, that would have to be enough. After a few moments, Awase threw something at him. Tiger! Catch! He spun on his heel and caught what looked like an extra-large blanket. It's Kevlar! Yayozuru shouted weakly. Wrap his arms and Awase can bend the fabric to trap it. Tiger nodded. It was a huge piece of fabric, much larger than Yayorozu really had the resources to safely make at the moment, which meant that he only had one chance to get this right. He felt a little ridiculous, spreading the blanket out in front of him. It was like he was trying to catch a troublesome toddler instead of a deadly monster. He flinched slightly as he gripped the Normu in a giant bear hug, wrapping it up like a burrito and gripping tighter as its arms tried to tear through the fabric. Awase! Now! Awase gulped but ran to help, bonding the Kevlar both to the monster's skin and to itself as the Normu roared. Once he was sure everything was secure, Tiger slowly loosened his grip. Perhaps we should bond it to that cliff over there, just to be safe. Awase nodded and picked up Yayorozu, as Tiger carried the Nomu over the cliff face and held it in place. When it was firmly stuck there, Tiger held out his arms for Yayorozu, and Awase handed her over gratefully. Tiger's heart sank when he felt how light she was. She was barely conscious, and she must have used almost every available ounce of fat in her body, because her knees and elbows dug into him as he shifted her onto his back. Come on, he said. Let's get you kids home. Take a deep breath, Tokoyami, Mandalay projected. The heroes are here. We'll protect you. You're safe. No! Dark Shadow screamed. Kill villains! Protect friends! I'll protect them, I promise. Mandalay kept her thoughts as calm as possible. But to do that, I need you to calm down, okay? They're going to be so sad and scared to see you like this. Just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. That's it. You're okay. We're okay. We're gonna be fine. Dark Shadow didn't let go of Tokoyami, or shrink down to his normal size, but when he finally stopped muttering about blood and murmur, Mandalay figured it was finally safe to come out. Thank you. Tokoyami nodded gratefully. I apologize for losing control like that. It's all right, Mandalay smiled. I'm just glad we were able to get you back. Come on, let's get you to camp where it's safe. Hold strong! Izuku yelled as he reloaded. Keep fighting! He recognized Muscular from the reports of Waterhose's death, and knew that even one of him would be almost impossible to beat. But they were having to fight two of the guys at a time. Darby and the cloning villain stood at the edge of the forest, but they couldn't even get to them because every time they destroyed one clone, the villains just made another. The air wall was long gone, destroyed within seconds of the onslaught, and even though they'd all retreated inside, the building had held up about as well as the air wall had. They'd destroyed something like 10 or 15 clones at this point. Izuku had lost count, but they just kept coming, with no end, and even as fragile as they were, Muscular was legitimately trying to kill them, and he was more than strong enough to deal significant damage before they could destroy one. A few of the students already had broken bones, and Izuku watched in horror as one of the clones grabbed Kirishima tightly enough that the rock literally cracked under his grip and threw him through a wall. If this kept going, someone was going to die. Izuku took a deep breath and ran towards Dabi. "Fine! I'll do it. I'll go with you. Just stop!" Dabi grinned, running forward to torch the Muscular that attacked Kirishima as the clone that the other villain had been making dissolved back into goop. "Good choice." "Midoriya! No!" Shinso yelled. "What do you think you're doing?" Izuku smiled sadly. "I'm keeping everyone safe." His mind went blank as Shinso took control. "Get back here, you idiot, and let us protect you." Izuku's feet moved against his will, and he didn't know whether he was angry or relieved as he moved back towards the safety of his classmates. Suddenly, a searing hand on the back of his neck broke Shinso's hold, and Dabi snarled. "Not so fast, Deku. You're ours. Or would you prefer we kill you and then murder all your precious little classmates one by one?" Izuku deflated. "No. I'll go with you." "That's more like it," Dabi smirked. "Oh, and just to make sure we don't have any problems." He grabbed the gun from Izuku's hand, and he had to flinch away from the heat as Dabi literally melted the gun in the palm of his hand. He then shoved Izuku forward, turning to the cloning villain. "Come on, Twice. Let's get going. And make a few clones of mustard, just to make sure none of these brats can follow us." Ochako watched in awe as Toga and Moonfish fought. He may have been a little crazier, but even if Toga had never used his quirk before, she knew her way around knives. When Moonfish was stabbing randomly, every single one of Toga's strikes was pinpointed for maximum blood loss. And he couldn't even stab her because parts of her were constantly shifting into people who were able to counter him. It was amazing. Ochako knew they were running out of time, though. The vials on Toga's belt were all empty, and they all knew that blood wouldn't last forever. How much had she even drank? Maybe like an ounce or two from each person, if that? How long would that allow her to hold the transformations? As it turned out, not very long, but Ochako needn't have worried because Toga wasn't about to let that become an issue.
"I've never tried this before, but it's kind of like an endpoint between transformations, right?" Toga pouted. "I don't think it will be very cute, though."
She shifted again, and suddenly it was Shoji facing Moonfish. Except for that, when the mouths on the end of the arms opened, dozens of knives shot out. Moonfish didn't stand a chance. In less than a minute, he was on the ground as the pain and blood loss finally got too much for him to stay upright.
I was right.
Toga shuddered as she melted back into herself.
That was totally not cute.
A cloud of poisonous gas stretched out behind them. And unlike the villains, Izuku didn't have a gas mask, so he was starting to get lightheaded. He kept hoping to run into one of the teachers, but with the way Darby was leading them away from the fighting, he wasn't liking his odds. He had no idea where their destination was, but they must be close, because the magnet villain he'd seen earlier came rushing out of the woods towards him. "The heroes are coming! We gotta go!" Darby scowled. "Great work, Magne. Where's Spinner?" "Captured," Magne said. "I just barely got away. Are you three alright?" "Two," Darby corrected. "The Frysource twins over there are just clones." "It's Mustard!" the clone snapped. "Sure." Darby rolled his eyes. "Whatever." "Well, I don't think we have time to wait for him," Magne said. "I saw a Razorhead on my way here. He was busy helping one of the kids and didn't see me, but it's only a matter of time before he heads this way." Darby swore. "Catch up! Make a smoke screen in that direction. Twice, make a clone of this brat. That'll keep him off our tail long enough to get away." "Do you not know how long it takes to measure someone?" Twice complained. "Easy peasy." Izuku tensed. This was his only chance. He held still until Twice got close, then headbutted him away and grabbed his tape measure, wrapping it around Darby's hands and booking it. He could hear Darby cursing behind him, and smelled smoke, which pushed him to run a little faster. His stomach sank as he realized just how far they'd gotten from the main attack. Unless a razor had been on Magne's tail, which didn't seem likely, he wouldn't be showing up before Izuku was recaptured. He wasn't getting out of this. What was he supposed to do? Just give up? Izuku shook his head. No. He was a hero. Heroes didn't give up. He needed a plan. He couldn't avoid getting captured, so what was the next best option? Izuku's breath caught as he recognized his surroundings. The training targets! He hadn't left many of them, but there should be one near here, and it would have a tracker inside. There's no guarantee Eraser would even think to look for the signal, but it was better than being kidnapped with no way to find him. He had to enter Mustard's gas to reach the target, so he took as few breaths as he could, but the world was still starting to spin around him as he pushed forward until he found the tree the target should be hidden in. A small hole in one of the knots caught his eye, and Izuku cried in relief as his hand closed around the blinking marble. He collapsed onto his knees and shoved it in his shoe, right before Darby and the other villains entered the clearing. You quirkless, not what? Darby's words blended together, and Izuku wasn't sure if Twice had cloned him or if the gas was starting to make him see double. Idiot! Into the gas! Stupid brat! He saw Darby take out a phone and say something. Izuku was far too gone to understand what he said, but he must have been calling Kurogiri, because it only took a few seconds for a portal to appear. Izuku scrambled weakly away, but the next thing he knew, there was a searing pain as Darby grabbed his arm and shoved him roughly through the portal just before everything went black. Shota reached camp just after the Pussycats, carrying 2 students who had passed out from the gas. He had run into Vlad, Tetsu, and Kendo on his way, and they'd followed behind him, carrying even more victims. He'd been hoping to find the students huddled together in a corner of the building, terrified but safe. But instead, they were scattered across the yard, and the building may as well have been wet cardboard with how well it withstood whatever had happened to them. The Pussycats were busy giving first aid, and Shota counted at least 10 broken bones and 3 students unconscious from the gas, and that was just at a first glance. Even Kirishima had a broken arm, which Shota honestly hadn't thought was possible without extreme quirk exhaustion. "What do you mean he's gone?" Urarako's shrill yell cut over the white noise in Shota's head. "They kidnapped Deku?"